On today's episode, I talked to Pamela Hirsch. Pam started Baby Quest. It is a scholarship for those undergoing fertility treatment. They've awarded $2.3 million so far, just have had their 120th baby born from the scholarship. I'm going to go into the details of why this is so pivotal at the finance stage between consult and treatment inside the fertility center to have relationships with scholarship programs like this and have education about them. Today's shout out is going to go to Dr. Laura Shaheen. Dr. Shaheen hit me to Baby Quest. She was a board member for a long time, still maybe as far as I know, but at least she was. And I don't know if I've shouted out Dr. Shaheen. I may have. I don't really keep track of the shout outs, guys. So please let Laura know that I shouted her out on this episode. And if I already did, well, 2 shout outs is just fine. It's good to be benevolent with your shout outs. On today's episode, it's not that Baby Quest is the only good scholarship program. And I feel like people are going to be like, why the hell didn't you mention mine? I'm sorry. ACG scholarships is another really good one. There's a few more that I'm forgetting that people are probably going to remind me of in the emails, but they should, and they should be on your list as well. So finance is one of the stickiest points of moving people from consult to treatment, and having a list of scholarships and having different places that people can apply is the final catch for those that aren't able to get employer coverage, aren't able to get insurance coverage, maybe can't get a loan, maybe can't get money from friends and family. It's important that you have all of those steps. We want to reduce the number to as minimal as possible of people that can't afford treatment, and scholarships are your last line of defense. Everybody needs to have them. And so we talk about what that's like with Pam and how they interface with clinics and pay clinics, frankly, a lot more easily than many insurance companies do. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Pam Hirsch. Ms. Hirsch, Pam, welcome to Inside Reproductive Health.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today.
You were brought to my attention, your organization was brought to my attention by some people that have been on your board. And I do get a lot of requests from nonprofits to come on the show. And sometimes I have them on and other times I'm too busy. And sometimes it's a little bit of luck of the draw. So I hope people don't hate me that have wanted to be on the show, but haven't been. But Baby Quest I knew of because I knew some of the docs that have been on your board for a few years. Today, I want to talk about how you work with or how you interact with clinics. But let's first just start off with some of the backstory of Baby Quest. You've awarded more than $2 million at this point. You have almost 120 babies born. You've got 10 pregnancies right now from Baby Quest funds. So let's just talk about how you got there and what it is that got you there.
Sure. And actually, to correct you, as of yesterday, we have 120 babies.
There we go.
20th was born yesterday in Dallas.
What a milestone.
It is. I started Baby Quest almost 10 years ago. It will be 10 years since we've given out the first grant this March 2022 will be 10 years. And I was totally out in a different area, a different workspace than fertility. I was one of the founders of a group called the Princeton Review test prep company. And I had worked in education for a long time. And after I sold my part of the company, very soon after, our younger daughter started to experience issues trying to have a child. And she and her husband first, she had a miscarriage, then there was Clomid, then there were many IUIs, and then 4 IVFs, each ending in miscarriage, till it was discovered that she needed to have a child via surrogacy because she couldn't carry. And this opened my eyes to the world of infertility and seeing the disparity of those who can afford procedures such as IVF and surrogacy and those who can't, and the fact that many people don't have insurance coverage for this. So that's when I started Baby Quest in March of 2012. That was when we first gave out our first grant. And that was maybe $9,000, two grants, one very small, one for IUI, one larger one, produced the first baby in Reno, Nevada. And since then, we've grown considerably. As you said, we've given out over $2.3 million now, and 120 babies and counting. And we do this twice a year, giving out grants.
So how did you start to get some doctors on your board? How did you even get a board? If I look at your board, I recognize probably 5, 6, 7 names on here. And so how did that come to be?
Well, let's see, when I first started, I pretty much saw somebody on the street and said, "Oh, you want to be on my board?" I have no idea whether we'll be able to be around next year, but here's the idea. And as we progressed, obviously, we became more selective, and I started going to some conferences, and I met some amazing doctors. I actually knew Dr. Mark Kalin first here in Encino or Los Angeles, and then eventually, by word of mouth, because of what we were doing, connected with several other doctors. I believe we have 6 doctors from all around the country on our board now. And we're very fortunate to have their expertise to guide us in the medical part of evaluating applicants.
So how do you evaluate applicants? One of the things that I look at from a fertility patient journey standpoint is you attract their attention and educate them on the problem that they're facing, then educate them on your approach to solving the solution. Then you have to get them into the office, and there's a gap from when they contact you to when they actually come in, and people can fall off there. And then you get them in the office, and you ostensibly educate them or test them depending on when follow-up or the first visit comes. But then you have a gap between that consult and treatment. And in so between the second and third phases, finance is hugely at play. And so anything with finance, we try to help with the system that people use on the clinic side and the information that patients are prepared with beforehand. But you're coming in, you are helping with that, but 120 people out of all of the people that need help, of course, you're helping as many people as you can, and that's a fraction of who needs help. So how do you make that decision?
Right. Well, first of all, as far as when the people consult us, we get applicants after they've been sitting in the business office and they know what their treatment plan is. They need IVF, they need surrogacy, they need egg donor, sperm donor, genetic testing to eliminate cystic fibrosis or Tay-Sachs, something like that. And they sit there in the financial counselor's office and they learn what the price tag is, and they start to cry and realize that they don't have the money. And that's when people start to do their research on what's out there for me. My insurance won't cover this. My employer, won't cover this. What kind of resources are out there? So that's generally when somebody reaches out to us and when they apply. And we have 2 grant cycles a year. We receive hundreds of applications, and as many applications are good, we just are obviously strapped by how many donations we get, and we can only give out the amount of money that we have. So it's a very selective process. And the way applicants are selected, there are several committee levels. Our board consists not just of the doctors that you mentioned that will come into play, but also of financial people, of women's health advocates, of surrogacy agency owners, of people who have dealt with infertility in their own lives and have an expertise in the subject, whether it's personal or professional. So the first round of applications is the application is looked at. Does this include everything? Did the person submit a doctor's eval? Is everything there? That's the first round. Next round, we have a fantastic committee of 7 people, around the country, and we go through the applications one by one, and we eliminate. Is the person asking for more than what we can give? Just a myriad of different criteria.
Are you investigating their coverage as well? Like they broke down in the financial office, but wait, turns out they actually do have progeny coverage.
Yes, they submit their insurance information, and we don't do that for everybody, but we do that when when the group is more limited. We can't do that for hundreds, and there's many that are just, if somebody is asking for $50,000, we can't give that to one person. And the thing with our grants is that if somebody needs $10,000, for instance, their procedure is $15,000 and they have $5,000 of their own, they need $10,000. If we give them $1,000 and say we're giving a grant, what is that person going to do other than save money for another 5 years and not be able to proceed? So our grants cover the major portion of what the treatment plan is, whether it be IVF, surrogacy, egg donation, sperm donation, egg freezing, embryo donation, whatever. So after the first 2 committees, we have a financial person who looks at the application. Does the applicant seem to be spending their money wisely? Do they have 3 cars for 2 people? Do they just how, do they have enough in their savings, but they just don't want to contribute it? They'd rather have somebody else pay for it, things like that. Then after the financial committee looks at the application, the finalists go to the medical doctors, and those are the doctors that you mentioned, 5 or 6 doctors who look at the same medical piece of information for each of the finalists, and they give us their judgment on this person has a decent chance to have a viable pregnancy.
You get 5 or 6 judgments back when you do that?
Yes, I will say yes. Very true. And it makes you realize that this is not a precise science whatsoever. You're totally right on that. There are certain times when there is just something there that maybe we haven't caught, and the doctors will say, oh no, this is just not going to work. And if that person is consistently low on every evaluation, we realize this is not a good candidate. But it's difficult. There is no perfect solution. Every single time we've done this, we have improved it. We've made corrections. We've become more diligent, and there's no perfection, unless we had $1 million and then we could give money to everybody. But that's not going to happen.
Well, speaking of $1 million, how have you raised the 2.3 that you've been able to distribute thus far?
Groveling at first, because
to whom? To anybody that you could have a cocktail party with in LA? Who are the first people that you groveled to? Friends
whose charities I had donated, or my husband and I had donated to for years and years, and cocktail parties and not fun chicken dinners that cost $500 a person that we had gone to for many years, and I had never called in any favors, so that they were first on my list, and I didn't make any enemies, so that's good. And then word of mouth, and then social media. It just grew. I've been very fortunate in business, and I just run, even though I came from the for-profit world, I really run BabyQuest as a business. And hopefully I'm very fiscally prudent in the choices that we've made. And we just, part of it is luck, and the other part is a lot of hard work.
So the first was from friends and in growing the network. When did it become fundraisers, or now do you have a systematic approach for do you have any corporate philanthropy? How has it grown?
Sure. Started out as individuals, probably crying or screaming when I got my first check that was over $100. Kept on like that for a while. Then we started with some small fundraisers, again, like hikes or what did we do? Small cocktail parties, just telling people, little luncheons, telling people about BabyQuest. And it kept growing, word of mouth. And now we do have a much more structured program. We offer the Giving Hope Grant, which is for companies or corporations. If they contribute a minimum of $12,000 on a yearly basis, they can choose to adopt one of our recipients. And that has happened several times. We have couples who've come along who have been very fortunate with their own journey to parenthood through IVF or surrogacy. And they acknowledge the fact that they have been fortunate financially. So they want to pay it back. So they come to us and they say, here's a grant, here's a donation of $10,000. We want to help a particular couple. They can remain anonymous, or they can actually communicate with the couple who they more or less adopt. And that has happened, several times, quite a bit as well. But
Can couples earmark a scholarship? Earmark's not the right word, because I don't mean to say set it aside for a particular case, no. But rather can they title their scholarship so that it's coming from BabyQuest, but this is the Janet and Tim Rodriguez scholarship.
Exactly. We have a company called an escrow, one of the companies that many people use for surrogacy to put their money in an escrow account, Seed Trust. And they have adopted, if you want to call it, or sponsored recipients 2 or 3 times. We have a surrogacy agency, Abundant Beginnings, which happens to be owned by my daughter, who now is the surrogacy agency owner. They have sponsored a grant. We have a celebrity from Real Housewives of Atlanta, Kenya Moore, whose hometown is Detroit. And she generously sponsored 2 couples from Detroit. One will be having a baby next month. And that's called her grant was the Giving Hope Grant. So definitely couples, some choose to remain anonymous, some definitely want to name their grant. And the companies generally, we have Brides for a Cause, which is a company in Seattle, based out of Seattle. And they have been very generous with sponsoring recipients.
So as you start to grow forward, I imagine the board might change every couple years, or some seats stay on for longer. Are there fixed terms? Do you have board needs now? What's that like?
The term is 2-year, renewable if the person wants to. And fortunately, many of our board members have stayed on for quite a long time. I believe there's 18 of them. And we just recently added 2 new board members. It's always good to get a new infusion of ideas. And since our focus has changed recently to try to do more corporate outreach, some of our board members were not adding physicians at this time, but we're looking at board members who have some corporate ties that might be helpful.
Speaking of corporate ties, have you noticed the demographics of especially the geographics of the patient population that you're awarding scholarships to start to shift? Because 10 years ago you had very little corporate benefits, and now it's far more common, and in some marketplaces it's more common than it isn't. And so as Progeny and Carrot and others that are trying to enter that race,
right?
Kindbody, as they start to broker benefits, and now you've got Facebook and Google and Amazon and Microsoft offering those kinds of benefits. Are you starting to see different folks apply for the scholarships than you were some years ago?
Not really. No, there's always a need. And no matter what companies are offering insurance, which is wonderful if that happens, there's still a need. And we see so many nurses applying, firemen, policemen, social workers. I wouldn't say that really has changed that much. And again, it seems as though we do get more applicants from certain cities, whether that's word of mouth, whether it's the clinics telling people, but some of the major cities, Philadelphia, Dallas, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Seattle, they seem, you know, those are cities where we get a lot of applicants.
Proportionally, do you see far fewer from mandated states than you do mandated states?
Not really. Well, yes, in one instance, I will say that, yes, Massachusetts. We just gave the first grant we have ever given to Massachusetts. It's a same-sex male couple from the military, actually, using a surrogate. And I would say Massachusetts, people in Massachusetts apply the least number in the least numbers of just about any state.
That makes
any
sense.
populated state. I mean, if you look at a state like Montana or Wyoming, no, we don't get very many applicants from that.
Sure. So how do you work with clinics? You know, my interest in working with clinics is always getting the prospective patient through the journey with the least pain possible, meaning the least pain to them. They know what they're getting themselves into. They're prepared. The clinic has rapport ahead of time. The least pain possible to the staff. They have less resistance. They're getting less questions that could be answered ahead of time and spending more of their individualized time with the patient, actually individualizing their care and not doing redundant things and not causing more stress and extra work for them. And at the financial end, anything that I can do to prepare patients to be ready for that discussion without giving them the wrong information ahead of time. That's kind of the hard thing, Pam, is when people want financial information. Well, you could tell somebody that the base price of an IVF cycle is $15,000. That is, even though you're trying to be transparent, that's not really transparent, because one, they might need just timed intercourse, and then you've just kind of scared somebody away that just needs to see a consult, even if it's with an APP in your office, even via Zoom. Like, you've just scared somebody away from that. Or it could be somebody that needs a gestational carrier, that's going to need a multi-cycle guarantee, that's going to need donor gametes, and then you've plus the meds, and then all of a sudden $15,000 is hardly a drop in that bucket.
Right.
And then you've totally bait and switched someone. And so what I try to do is get someone to think about, okay, this is where in the journey you are going to get the accurate information. This is how you are going to get it. This is how you are going to learn how to pay for it. And so preparing them of how they are going to receive the right information, as opposed to giving them the wrong information. What you do, because you really come in at that place between the second and third phase, between consult, before treatment, and it's for those that have gotten stuck in the financial counselor. That is one of the things in the arsenal that clinics have that I think they often forget about. And so can you talk about how you work with clinics?
We generally get the applicants after they have a plan. And actually, because we can't do the research, let's say that somebody applies and they say, well, we don't know what we're applying for. We don't know if we need an IVF, or we don't know if we need an IUI, or we don't know for sure if we're going to need donor eggs, whatever. We don't have the manpower to go through 200 or 300 applications and help the person decide what they need. And we're not doctors to begin with. So we really take that applicant when they have a plan. That person has been to the clinic. In fact, okay, for donor eggs, for example, somebody who's going to need donor eggs or surrogacy, that person really needs to have a plan, because if they submit an application to us and they say, well, we may need donor eggs, we may not, the price is going to be $15,000 if we don't need them, $30,000 if we do, we don't have the manpower to call each person and say, let's talk about your plan. What's your ovarian reserve. What does your doctor say about this? What are the how many IVFs have you gone through? Have you had an egg retrieval and none of the eggs have turned, been able to be fertilized? We get the person really when they have a plan and the plan is concrete. This is a person who has spoken with the financial counselor, has explored his or her options for insurance coverage, and basically has said, I'm going to either need to take out a big loan if I don't have the money, or because I've been denied insurance coverage because my insurance coverage will only cover the diagnosis. It will not go one step further. So that's when we get the person. And so we have to proceed from that step of this person needs $9,000 to proceed because they have a little bit of cash that they can do it. We will call the doctor if we love this person, if this person proceeds through all the committees and the different levels, and we come up to an application that is really wonderful with a personal story, and we're just so impressed with the person of they've spent $12,000 already on failed procedures, and here they are, and they just don't have the money to proceed. We'll call the doctor's office and ask if there is any chance. We've asked already in the application, but we'll call and say, you've indicated that you cannot give a discount to this patient. Is there any way we can get $500 off or $1,000 off so that we can help this patient and take that $500 that you give us off and give that to add that to another grant for somebody else? Anyway, that's the place where we meet the applicant. So
how often does the clinic meet you there on a request like that?
Less than 50%.
Less than 50.
Yes.
All right. Well, that's why you're on the podcast, because I want that number up when we talk. I want it better be hearing everyone that's listening. That better be 75% next year.
Would be nice. Yes.
I want that number going up so that you can benefit more people. But other than that, so hopefully you get a little bit of a discount because then you can put that back and that total sum helps more people. But even if you don't get it, is there anything you really need from the clinic?
Good communication, cooperation as far as servicing their patient, returning phone calls to their patient, just being the clinic that anybody would expect them to be as far as customer service. As far as us, in fact, this just happened this week. Last Monday night, we told the 6 people who got grants that they had received a grant. The next day, we sent them paperwork explaining exactly what their grant entailed, how much money, what medications, if any, and everything. And then the procedure is we tell the clinic, your patient got a grant. The clinic had filled out some paperwork because they have to for the medical part. And we tell the clinic, your patient got a grant. There are some clinics that we have worked with before that are a pleasure. I mean, the nurse is responsive, the business office is responsive. It works like clockwork. There are other times when the patient has received a written, signed statement of this is what the procedure will cost, and all of a sudden the costs seem to change, and they always change in the higher rather than the lower. We are their advocates. We will fight for them. It does not happen often, but
so not a lot. Like you don't need much from the clinic, so they are better off having you in their arsenal. Exactly. Every clinic should have a number of these scholarships in their arsenal, and you're one that has been among the more established and proven out and had longer tenures. But there is no reason that every financial office should not have a list of these. Now, the order in which that comes in, you talk about where that comes in, but there is a last line of defense when people are like, well, we don't want to bring in people that are totally unqualified. Well, you let people make that decision as they go through this system, and you can get them some information earlier to think about things. But there is a way to get people paid for from a number of these different scholarships, and the better relationship they have with you and the more they have, the more people they're going to be able to serve.
I think one of the things that to me is so annoying is that, and this still happens after 10 years. I understand if this would have happened 10 years ago, but we'll get a personal story. If somebody who applies has to write a 2-page story. And we've seen some of the comments in the stories, even recently. My doctor says this is a scam. My doctor said I shouldn't apply. Do you know that makes us even want to give that person a grant even more so that we can show the clinic that we exist? And it's interesting that within the past week, even, one of the clinics mentioned to one of our recipients, a very skeptical, well, how in the world are we ever going to get paid from them? And it's just amazingly easy. Let's say that we've told the person that we will pay $9,000 of their clinic fees. They come to the day when that patient needs to pay the $9,000. She's at the clinic, or she's going to go there tomorrow for her baseline or for her egg retrieval, depending on when the clinic demands payment. The clinic picks up the phone, calls our office. I answer, or somebody answers. I give them a credit card on the phone. They charge the credit card, and that's it, period. There is no 1,000 pages of paperwork. There's no bureaucracy. There is somebody else with a credit card paying the bill for the patient who couldn't afford it.
Did I say 75% when I said that should be the number of centers that give you a discount when you ask for it? Yeah, with that number ought to be 90% by next year, because guess what, Pam? They are already doing that with the insurance companies who are beating them up, with the corporate benefits companies that are beating them up. And so maybe, I mean, that could be reason. And people are slammed, especially the last year and some change. Fertility centers are slammed. And so I could say, well, why should we do that? It's like, well, because partly if the need-based reason isn't good enough for you, which I hope it would be, but if it isn't, because of what Pam just said, you're not fighting on these claims. It's talking to BabyQuest on the phone and getting a credit card number.
What's interesting is I could actually get it out. It's what we send the doctors, or what the doctors have to fill out. When somebody applies, they print our application from the website. They fill out the 15 pages of financial information and education and profession and insurance cards and insurance information and all that. And then they have 3 pages they take to the doctor. 2 of those pages are medical, 4 pages, I'm sorry, a signed HIPAA form authorizing us to be able to see the medical information. 2 pages of height, weight, BMI, how many miscarriages, what's their egg count, what's their AMH levels, semen analysis, that kind of stuff. And the recommendation from the doctor, what procedure do you recommend that the patient do? And the last page is a letter that says to the doctors, we are going to, big if, and it's in bold, if this patient is selected by BabyQuest to receive a grant, will you match our grant, give a certain amount, give a discount of a certain percentage, or are you unable to give a discount? And that business manager checks that we're unable to give a discount so fast. And a lot of times they'll make up an excuse. Oh, our prices are already low. Obviously, they're not low enough that this person's going to be able to afford it without a grant. So and we reiterate in the last paragraph, this discount that you're allowing the patient to have is only applicable if this person is selected for BabyQuest. If this person is not selected by us, it's your decision. You don't have to give them $100 off or $500 off or $1,000. It's only if they're selected, but it's really easy to put that check mark there. And these are people who have spent, this has happened, $15, $20, $30,000 at a clinic and have had no results. And they're asking for a discount of $1,000, $500, and it's almost a crime to me that.
Yeah, in an instance like that, it would be much better, especially if they've already spent a lot of money without success. And the fact that you're not asking for one sum allows some discretion, because frankly, there are some centers that are a lot more expensive than others. And some, there are a few out there that have really done everything to be economical. We've had some of those folks on the podcast, and they almost have like a different model, but that it allows them to have the discretion of saying, well, even if it's pretty cheap, it's like, especially if they've already been with us a couple of times, could we knock a couple $100 off? And if we are on the more expensive side, then maybe you do knock some more off. And that's where one thing that as I'm thinking about this, Pam, is I've advised people not to really be so much in the middle on pricing, strictly from a positioning standpoint, not an access to care standpoint. If it's an access to care standpoint, it's entirely within the heart of the physician, but I still would recommend perhaps channeling that difference to something like this. And here's what I mean by positioning: that the low cost IVF, the affordable IVF model, draws people based on that, but the middle of the road doesn't. And so in the middle of the road on pricing, very often you're just sacrificing your own margins, and you're not elevated in the eyes of the patient. But if you feel like, well, I want more people to access care, this is something else you could do. If you didn't want to take the middle of the road on the positioning, but you are still feeling saintly and you want more people to have access to care, you could be applying the wins that you're having in the margins, or the safety that you have in the margins there, to discounts like this.
Well, I won't say that it is across the board bad. I mean, our board members, our own doctors who are on the board, have generously, and we don't want to overload them. We never would send more than one person, I would say a year, two at the most, a year, to the same clinic, because we're not saying, oh, you have to be our clinic and we're going to send you a ton of patients, because we don't want to overload somebody who is giving us a discount, who's generous enough to be doing that. But on the other hand, sometimes it's hard to understand that if this is a really great person who really needs the IVF and has a great chance for success, and this person is not going to be able to proceed with treatment, wouldn't the clinic be happy to give $1,000 off and say, oh, we get a patient, versus the patient is not going to be able to afford it if they don't get a grant?
Yeah, well, some of them might. What if some of them want you to slam them with a couple of cycles? I'm thinking most probably wouldn't, with how busy they are right now. But I'm thinking of, there was one market that we did two groups. We evaluated two groups this year in the same market. It's a very competitive top 20 market, growing, and that's an area where you've got really large competitors. And especially if you feel like, well, maybe we're not converting as many people we should be, maybe this is an angle for us.
Right. Yeah, it's just, as I said, it's very disheartening to open the application, find a great application, somebody who's really put the work into the application, poured their heart into their fertility journey, and to see that that there's no cooperation. And that does not mean that we won't give them a grant. And people will say, well, does it mean if our doctor is not willing to give us a discount, does that really disqualify us from getting a grant? Well, obviously, it means we have to pay a little bit more for their procedure, but it does not disqualify them. Sure, we'd love everybody to be able to get a discount from their doctor, but it's not going to happen. And we're not going to disqualify somebody because we need to give an extra $2,000 in a grant, because the doctor won't do that. But then again, if a clinic will give a 20% discount, which usually comes up to about $2,000 on the phase that, I mean, we understand clinics can't give a discount or cannot promise a discount on the anesthesia, which isn't that expensive, but they can't promise that because that's out of their control. It's independent. Some clinics can't discount the facility fee. They don't have their own facility. But those clinics where they do have their own facility, and we ask if they can discount the physician and the facility fee, or the physician and the lab fee if they own their own lab. And that if it comes up to a $2,000 discount for a patient, it's fantastic. It really helps everybody.
Well, I hope you get a few more discounts between now and next year. Maybe someone's listening that would be a good fit for a board member, maybe a couple donors. Pam Hirsch, thank you so much for coming on Inside Reproductive Health.
And thank you for having me. I appreciate it.